let's talk about cash. Today we're going to talk about what I would do if I received the windfall of extra cash in the amount of $10,000, $100,000, and $1 million. Obviously that's not a super reasonable amount of money to just come into, but here's how I think about allocating extra cash that I have in my pocket. Obviously a lot of the bases of where I put cash tend to be the same, so I'll talk about things like retirement accounts, high yield savings, etc., but I'll walk it through kind of in each amount of money, so hopefully that's helpful for you in some capacity. Here are the assumptions I'm going to be holding. Number one, the money is not being taxed. So if I'm getting 10K, I'm getting 10K just out of the door. We're not talking about any tax rates or whatever. It's just if I had 10,000 extra dollars. Number two, I'm going to talk as if my income isn't going to be shifting. So I'm going to keep working, I'm going to keep making money, whatever. Number three is that this doesn't include donations or tithing, though I will show where I would take that out if I personally received this amount of money, but I know not everybody does that. Personally, I try to donate around 10% of my money to mutual aid orgs because that's what I feel comfortable with at the moment, but I know that that's not for everybody. Four is that I'm assuming that I have no big outstanding debts. So obviously if you have a big outstanding debt that will be outpaced by the market, so any debt that's above, I would say 5 to 7%, I would pay that off first with whatever extra cash that I had. A lot of people tend to pay down big debt even if the market will outpace it just because of peace of mind, and I'm one of those people. I don't like having big debt, but we are assuming for this situation that I wouldn't have things like big credit card debt, etc. Obviously everyone's situation is a little bit different, so here's the things about me that I think are important to talk about when I'm talking about allocating cash. I'm single, I'm a renter, so I don't own any property. I have 3 pets, I'm employed, I already have a basic 3 to 6 month emergency fund, and I'm 24 years old. Let's get into $10,000. Depending on your income level, you can either contribute to a regular or a Roth IRA, but the first thing I would do is put $6,000 into that type of retirement fund. When I receive big lump sums of cash for things like my bonus in finance, I try to put half of that immediately into savings, but since we're using this money to max out my retirement fund first, I would only put around 1.5K into savings. I personally would put about $1,500 into a high yield savings account. I personally use Marcus by Goldman Sachs, and their rate is about 0.50. This is obviously not sponsored with my super high subscriber count, but you can look for any high yield savings and just compare the rates online. That's also where I would take a donation or tithing out of. I would also probably put about $1,500 directly into the stock market. I tend to buy regular stock instead of mutual funds because I trade options on top of my base stock. So I would probably buy a couple shares of VOO, and then maybe a little bit of extra stuff with the money on top. My last thing is I would put $1,000 towards a fun purchase. Maybe get another tattoo, go on a short vacation, buy a new pair of pants. I don't know what people do with cash, but I would leave about $1,000 for something fun. That would probably go right to my pets. If we're talking about $100,000, I have 2 directions I would go with that type of money. Obviously, the first thing I would do with $100,000 is the same thing as what I would do with $10,000. I would immediately max out my IRA with $6,000. And then we have 2 clear different paths. The first is if I wanted to directly buy a house. Again, I'm 24, I'm renting. It makes a lot more sense to put money into a property and create equity as opposed to rent for as long as you can, though that's not always feasible. So, if given the opportunity to have a big lump sum of cash, I would probably put money towards a house. The reason I outlined my assumptions at the beginning of this is because if I was still making money, I would try to put down as much of that towards the base of the house, so to the mortgage. So what I'm saying is I would put $94,000 kind of towards a house, towards initial expenses, etc. And obviously there are different types of housing loans. People can get approved at much lower down payment rates than 20%, but I personally wouldn't feel comfortable putting down anything less than 10% just because of how I view the market. Ideally, I would look for a duplex so that someone else would be able to pay part of the rent and cover the mortgage while I could live in the house as well. This is a cool one where it estimates $2,300 a month of income from rent with a mortgage payment of $4,500 with putting down $94,000. That's much lower than what I would be paying if I moved into a house by myself. This also was based on the fact that you can now put down less than 20%. FHA loans, for example, allow you to buy a house with only 3.5% down. Though to avoid mortgage insurance, you do have to put 20% down, which is a pretty big expense. Because I know how hard it would be to swing buying a house with $100,000 in cash because I live in LA, I might go a different route. In that route, I would still put $6,000 into a retirement fund, and then I would put about $50,000 into a house savings fund. Because I'd be looking to buy a house in the next couple of years, not super long down the road, I wouldn't want to put that directly into the stock market. I would still probably put that into a really, really safe investment or just a high yield savings account. Because I like round numbers and that $56,000 is a little weird, I'm gonna say I would put $29,000 into the stock market. I like to think about the stock market as a salad, which is something an advisor I once worked with told me. He said that you want to think about the base of your salad, the lettuce, 90% of the bulk as index funds or just market tracking things, while 10% can go into single names, so fund trading money, whatever. I probably buy a lot of the indexes that I currently hold, so things like VOO, VO, and VWO. And then I would use 10% to buy more single name stocks, things I think are up and coming, maybe some tech names. So that's where I'd put $29,000 of that money. I would put $10K into my emergency savings, so that's my cash that I talk about in my high yield savings account. This is also where I would tithe out of or give money to mutual aid funds, so I'd put about 10% that direction. And because there's more responsible money, there's also more fun money. So I would probably take about $5,000 to do something fun. Maybe I'd go on a little trip with my sister. I would buy some nice new clothes, maybe replace some tech equipment I have, but I would use about $5,000 just for fun and not really track it as closely. And now comes the big one. So here is how I would allocate a cash inflow of $1 million. As per usual, we're sending $6,000 right to our retirement fund, keeping it in there, letting it sit until I want to retire. And because we just had more money here, I would put at least 20% down on a house. I've allocated $250,000 here, which seems like an absurd amount of money, but that's what I would look to do. Because a house of that size would probably outpace what I currently pay in rent, I'd want to set aside about $100,000 to pay for my mortgage and housing expenses and things like that, so that my entire paycheck right now wouldn't have to go directly towards paying house expenses. That does mean you can get a house a little bit above your current income level, but it does mean you have to be more careful about your savings and where you're putting your current paycheck and things like that. So with $1 million, because I don't need a crazy home or anything like that, most of it probably would just go into the stock market. I estimate that I would probably put half of $1 million, so $500,000, into the market, following the same basic investment principles as before. With that amount of money, you can be a little more flexible. I would probably buy some more REITs. I would diversify a little more, maybe get a little bit of fixed income. Because I'm 24, there doesn't need to be a lot of concern about my near-term horizon for needing that money or needing to cash out. So I really would just kind of be putting it in the market and waiting and seeing where it went. So again, I want most of that to be in index funds like VOO, VO, VWO, etc. The next thing I would do is I'd buy a new car. Note that I don't actually like to buy cars new. I think that's a really bad depreciating asset. I'd probably buy a used car, so it's a new to me car. I'd likely buy a Subaru. I like outdoor stuff and other things that I think you can infer about me from the fact that my dream new car is a Subaru. That says a lot about me, and you can infer that in the comments if you would like. My next thing after my car is I would put $100,000 into like a personal emergency savings account. So just to make sure I have cash on hand, whatever's needed, that's separate from my housing fund. I put about $100,000, again, into a high yield type savings situation, which is why I feel comfortable saying I'd put $500,000 directly into the stock market, because I would still have that cash to sit on. This combination of money is where I would pull any tithing or charitable givings, whatever, out of. So I'd pull about 10% out from there. The last $24,000 would be kind of fun or extra money. Obviously, some of these things are less precise, right? These are pretty big chunky numbers, so I'm sure some money would go into there. There's a lot of donations I would want to make. I think there's a lot of cool stuff I could do with my pets. I would take my friends out to dinner or on a vacation. My sister and I would definitely do something super fun. I would just like to have that kind of safety net for just fun things that I want to do where I don't have to think about them as much. I actually don't think at the moment that I could spend $24,000 and not feel like I was going bonkers, but theoretically there's $24,000 of books I could purchase. This is obviously a very extreme example of financial allocations, but I think it's a cool one to illustrate what people tend to do when they have big windfalls and aren't in a lot of debt. Getting to allocate money this way comes from a place of privilege, but it is something I've seen done for a lot of higher net worth clients. So how would you think about this big kind of liquidity type event? But most people have things like student loans and credit card debt, and obviously if you've received a big amount of money, paying those things off is a huge element for peace of mind. So obviously this is very, very privileged and high level. And it's fun to think about what amount of money becomes your you money. I hope this was fun. Please feel free to like, subscribe, comment, share any of the things that people normally ask you to do. If you hated it, feel free to leave me a snarky or rude comment and I'll try to come up with something funny in response. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.